Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Churchill Downs, and for those of you watching on our live stream online, we welcome you to the Triple Crown Room and the Jockey Club Suites at Churchill Downs. I'm John Asher, Vice President of Racing Communications here at the track, and I've been around the Kentucky Derby for 31 years, as my gray hair will attest, and I've been a part of the Churchill Downs team since 1997. I've seen a lot of things happen here as a member of the team and as an observer and someone who loves the Kentucky Derby, but I believe this is a special day. We've had some, over the 138-year history of the Run for the Roses, we've had some significant changes over those years. The race was originally 1.5 miles. It was scaled back to 1.25 miles, and in the last few decades, we had a limit of 20 horses placed on the race in the 1970s. That was just based on overall earnings. That one proved a little dicey over the years, and in the mid-'80s, 1986, we went to a system in which Kentucky Derby eligibility was based on earnings in graded stakes races, the top-level stakes races in our sport, and the 3-year-olds that made their way into the Kentucky Derby in years in which we had an overflow field had their eligibility dictated by that system. We have told many of you over the years when you've asked us about that system that we discuss this situation every year. We discuss the system to see how it works, to see how we could improve it. We hadn't made any significant changes in the past few years, but that didn't mean we weren't discussing it, and today I think we proved that. We're here today to announce a change in the system of eligibility for the Kentucky Derby and the Kentucky Oaks, its sister race for 3-year-old fillies. The creation of the Road to the Kentucky Derby series, the Road to the Kentucky Derby, a series of prep races starting in the fall of the 2-year-old year, a point system on those races through the fall of the 2-year-old year through the spring of the 3-year-old season that will determine the eligibility for the 20 horses. If there is a field of more than the maximum number of 20 horses in the Kentucky Derby, their eligibility for that race will be determined by the points collected in those races. The system is in place for the Kentucky Oaks as well. We're very excited about the news. We have worked long and hard on this system. Again, it's been years in discussion and fairly heavy work on it for the past 11 months or so. And so we're out with it today. And to give you more details and some of the thought behind what has happened here and what we hope will happen is the president of Churchill Downs Racetrack, Kevin Flannery. Kevin?
Thank you, John, and thank you everyone for being here. I am so excited about the announcement today, and I want to thank our team at Churchill Downs first and foremost for the incredible work they've done over an 11-month period. We have been looking at this in great detail. That was after we made the decision to make a change, including the folks who are helping us today with the live streaming of this press conference, which is something that we hope to do more of in the future. So with that said, I am so happy to announce that effective with the 2013 Kentucky Derby presented by Yum, we will have a new eligibility system for the 20 horses that will run in the greatest 2 minutes in sports. As John said, in the past we have, the past 30 some odd years, we have used the graded stakes system earnings to decide who's in the race. And what we've seen over that time is we've gotten a lot of feedback from people that it's something that the casual fan just simply doesn't understand. And if there's one thing we want to do, it's we want to grow this sport. We want to make it as accessible as possible to the folks who are here every day and those folks who come just on Derby Day so that they, over a period of time, understand what it's all about and become a fan not just of the Kentucky Derby, but of the road to the Kentucky Derby. So officially today we are announcing that there are 36 races that will lead to the Kentucky Derby. We will start with 19 races in our prep season, those races that are in the fall of the horse's 2-year-old season and the early 3-year-old season for those horses. And then we will culminate with a 10-week, compact, easy-to-follow 17-race series that leads to the Kentucky Derby. The same is true for the Kentucky Oaks. We've identified 35 races that will lead to the Kentucky Oaks and those horses that will run on that special weekend. I think that the one thing that I really want to emphasize here is we're trying to do something special. Why change? People have asked us quite often, why change? Why look at these things? If you notice last year, and as John said, we're always talking, and last year we introduced again the concept of also eligibles, because we want to make sure that those horses that want to be in the Kentucky Derby, the Kentucky Oaks, the trainers, the owners, those people who have invested in our business have the best opportunity to do that. It's also important that our fans understand what the game is about. I've said quite often, people know that the Kentucky Derby is the Super Bowl of racing. There's no doubt about it. It's that special moment in our sport. What we want to do is build upon those 2 minutes by creating a series, an understandable series of races that the casual fan can follow, that they can have their interest, be it the horse, the trainer, the owner, geographic diversity, and you'll see from the races and the locations that it's all over the country. We've been very respectful of the traditions as well. So our goal is to create a compelling story for the race fan to follow that all culminates on the first Saturday in May. That's easy to understand for the horseman, for the hardcore fan, and for the casual fan, and that respects the traditions and the energy of 138 years of tradition. So as we move forward, one of the things that you always hear us say is that we're not afraid of change. We're not afraid of being flexible. We want to make sure that the Kentucky Derby is a viable, breathing, living event for years and years to come. So we've identified those races that we think make sense. We've identified that path to the Kentucky Derby that the fans will be able to follow and get engaged in earlier, no matter where they are across this country. They can have a path to the Derby. And we're going to continue to be as flexible as we can. It's a 36-race series. I can envision this easily being a 40-race series. So we're going to listen at this point. Are there other options, other races that make sense in this path? Are there other events? A couple of things I want to focus on. It's all about making sure that on the first Saturday in May, we have the best race, the best horses, the best competition, the best stories, the best event possible. So as you look at our point system, you'll notice that as horses get closer and closer to the Derby, as the race conditions mimic the Derby, the distance, the points increase. It's no different than what we'll see in a few weeks with the Olympic time trials in track and field and in swimming. People train year-round, but you have to be ready on game day in order to qualify for the big event. And that's what it's got to be about for us. We want those horses, those teams in the best form, the best condition possible so that we have the best competition, the best race that we could possibly have. Now, with that said, there also, there's something exciting about that build up to the last couple of weeks. So we've added a couple of wild card races in there at the end as well. Now, the horses that compete in the wild card races, if they win that, they're probably not going to qualify automatically for the Derby or for the Oaks. 2 for the Derby, 1 wild card race for the Oaks. But if they've been competitive, they've shown that form, and they've shown the ability to compete, they might just make it off of the bubble and into the greatest race in the world. So with that said, we're excited about where we're going. We're excited about our opportunity to expand how people look at the Kentucky Derby. We will, as we announced earlier, we will be using different platforms to talk about this over the course of the series. So you will be able to follow the standings in USA Today during the entire road to the Kentucky Derby. We will have a lot of social media, Facebook interaction. Our Road to the Roses fantasy game will be ramped up so that people will be able not only to follow, but interact and be a part of what makes this great tradition. With the new media, it's a fascinating thing when the print media are taking their cameras out and taking pictures of you. We understand that our customers interact with us on many different levels. They want to feel a part of this great tradition, and we believe what we are announcing today will give them that opportunity. With that said, I'll be happy to take any questions. Okay. John is reminding me to repeat the questions. The question is, have we floated this idea out, sort of what has been the study group, if you will, I guess is what you're asking, Fred, and to deal with any criticisms. Essentially, this is something that we've developed inside. Now, that's not to say that we haven't listened to the voices of the racing community and the sports community, because if you go back and looked in our team, John Asher, Darren Rogers, we did a lot of research of stories that have been run over the past several years and comments that have been made by prominent trainers, owners, those who are involved in the business about what they thought should happen. So all of that has been taken into consideration. Now, a big part of what we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure we got our system in place before we did a formal announcement. So we've kept it pretty tight, but with a lot of input from people. This is not something that's just popped up overnight. Every year we get asked the question, are you going to continue with the current eligibility system? And every year we've said, we look at it, we review it, and that sparks conversation. So one of the great things about being Churchill Downs, one of the great things about being the home of the Kentucky Derby is no one is shy with their opinions. So we certainly get that. We know we're not going to make everybody happy with everything. We know that. That's one of the reasons we try and keep this as flexible as possible. As I said, we look at this as a potential, I can see it easily as a 40-horse series, a 40-race series. So we will listen now. We've identified 36 races. We've identified a path. We've identified a path, by the way, that requires the horses to run a mile in order to run the mile and a quarter of the Kentucky Derby. Seems sort of common sense, but in the past, we saw it this year. You can have horses that have never run a mile qualify for the Kentucky Derby. We want to make sure horses that really can do the distance, can make the distance, have that. So we'll continue to listen. That's one of the exciting things. And this is really simple, folks. We go from about 185 races worldwide. Who can name those 185 races? Well, it's a lot easier to identify 36. We will be working very closely on some media. I think a lot of you have seen the brochures today that identify the 36 races to the Kentucky Derby. That will be online as well in a nice interactive and infographic package, I think they tell me it is. Something that people can actually interact with and play with. 36 races, the last 10 weeks, the championship series, a compact series of races that I think will build the drama. One of the things that we hope will happen is it will be simple for people to follow the horses because the opportunities are there for some rivalries to get their root in the road to the Kentucky Derby. One of the exciting things about this year's Derby, I just loved the Triple Crown Series this year where we had I'll Have Another and Bodemeister in the Derby in a fantastic finish. And then they came back in the Preakness and repeated that. You saw the rivalry. And then Painter with the same connections as Bodemeister, sort of repeating that along the way as a second place finisher in the Belmont. By the way, Union Rags, Fred, I told you to watch Union Rags. But in any event, it is all about trying to build those rivalries, making it simple. Folks, you know when to turn on your TV, you know what races to follow. We'll have some interaction, some content, hopefully in newspapers around the country, not the least of which USA Today on the Fridays before the races, and on the Mondays after, sort of analyzing what's happened over the weekend. You know, one of the, and again, I'm rambling on a little bit, but I want to say something. I was thinking as I was sitting at the table, horse racing is a part of the culture of this country. When we talk about an upset in sports, it comes from the horse upset, upsetting Man of War. When you talk about also-rans in the political world or anywhere else, it comes from the term also-rans in horse racing. Football has that as well. There's Monday morning quarterbacking. It becomes part of the lexicon of our culture, not just our sports world. I want the Kentucky Derby to continue to be a part of that lexicon. I want people to be looking at the road to the Kentucky Derby and it to be water cooler conversation on Monday morning. That's what it's all about. Great question. The question was, how were the 36 races chosen? As I mentioned earlier, we've taken the last 11 months to really do a deep dive into the history and traditions of the Kentucky Derby and how horses have become eligible for the Derby. Number one in our mind was what races prepared horses to stand the test of the mile and a quarter Kentucky Derby. So we looked at the conditions of the race, and as you'll see, they're a mile. The shortest race is a mile under these 36 races. We looked at the surfaces. At this point, we only have one turf race in this, and it's a turf race in Europe. And we looked at the traditions of horses and the traditional paths that horses took to the Derby. So while we want to change, we want to respect those traditions. And I can tell you that our team, Darren Rogers and John Asher and others, have done every iteration. It's been kind of fun. We've built models around what races mattered and what horses came out and how they performed in the Derby. Not just did they get there, but how did they perform in the Derby. And so all of that data, all of that research went into selecting these 36 races that we think do two things: give a clear path and a path that is worthy of a Derby contender. Great question as well, Fred. The question is, do you think trainers and owners will think differently about the path that they will take to the Derby? And I think the question is obviously yes. This is about the future of racing, and it's like any sport, any exercise. When you have a goal in mind, and the goal is to be the Kentucky Derby champion, you look at the path and what makes sense. And what we believe is we've set a path that will have trainers and owners finding a path that makes sure their horse is in the best form possible as a 3-year-old. You know, 2-year-old racing is fantastic. We have 2-year-old races as part of this, but ultimately we want horses in their best form on the first Saturday in May. The question is, do we have a commitment on television for these to be aired? As you know, the past couple of years, the Road to the Kentucky Derby has appeared on the NBC networks. We will continue to work with them. We don't have any hard commitments, but NBC has been a tremendous partner with horse racing over the last several years, as long as I can remember, frankly, since my time here. Now the Triple Crown has been brought back together under the NBC umbrella, and you've seen that they have done such a tremendous job in raising the ratings and the viewership and the compelling stories around that. The Derby week alone, we have about, I think, 15 hours of broadcast coverage that week on the entire network of NBC stations, and we will continue to work with them. One of the things we have to ask ourselves in anything you do is, do you have a compelling story? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create something that the people will demand, and that all of our society and all of the sports world will follow. So we're looking at that. We'll be talking with it. We've got a great relationship with NBC for the Derby, and as I think they've said, they're excited about this innovation and what it can do for bringing attention to the racing in the weeks leading up to the Derby and the Oaks. Well, you know, what I do is I look to the future. My comment is the horses that were there, they made it there. They qualified under the rules that existed at that point. What we are stewards of is the future of the Derby, and making sure that as we look forward, we put together a path that creates the best form. In the last 30 years, the way horses are trained, when they run, it changes. You know, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, horses were running in the Derby trial on a Tuesday and bouncing back and running in the Derby on a Saturday. That's all changed. So we have to constantly evaluate that and ask ourselves not just what's going to happen in 2013, but what will happen as we go forward. And that's what we believe we've accomplished, is looking to make sure the best horses qualify going forward. I think the question was, is there a danger of it in the future? The reality is that in some jurisdictions with casinos that have fed purses, there's an easy opportunity to create races, you know, $1 million races in the 2-year-old season that horses can come in second in and have enough earnings to make it into the Derby in their 3-year-old year. Well, that's great. That means they were a good 2-year-old horse. We want them to get some credit for that. But as we look forward, we say, can that happen more often? And what really came out of that was, guess what? Someone else is controlling what the path to the Kentucky Derby is. Churchill Downs, we're the ones who are sort of in the city of Louisville. We are the ones who are the stewards of the Derby. And so as we looked at all the changes that were happening and how horses were qualifying, you sort of have that aha moment where you say, guess what? We should be making sure that we have the proper path to the Derby, that we're getting the best horses, and that we're giving everybody a chance to compete, a fair chance to compete at their zenith on the first Saturday in May. Yes, we have. The question was, and I'm sorry I didn't repeat the last one, was there any study of how this would have impacted past Derby fields? And the answer is yes. But I would start with this, to a question we had earlier. It's hard to look back when you change a system because behavior is going to change. People aren't going to run in the races that they would run. So we do have a couple that are on the bubble. I think in all likelihood, the one that you will all see, if you go back and do the math, probably Mind That Bird would not have been eligible for the Derby because he simply earned graded earnings in Canada as a 2-year-old and didn't have that as a 3-year-old. That doesn't mean he wouldn't have qualified because he may have taken a different path. And a couple of others would have been on the bubble. So yes, we've looked at that. Frankly, we've had a lot of fun with that because you can create every scenario you want under the sun. And then after we had some fun with that, we looked at it and said, okay, what does it look like as we go forward? And what is the path going to be that makes the most sense? And how will people react to that? I think when you see the list of races that you have before you and you look at the path, you'll see that we have really, really, really respected the traditions and the history of racing in the United States and the path to the Kentucky Derby. But at the same time, looking to the realities of training, the realities of racing in this current environment going forward, that I think we're going to have some special fields. And as I said before, this isn't just about the Derby. It's about that buildup, that period before the Derby, that the fan can get engaged. They know the path. They know what races are involved. They get a sense of the personality of the horses. And believe me, the horses have personalities. That is something that our fans and just this country, we're in love with the horse. And so the opportunity to see them at their highest levels and competing against one another over a period of time is something we think that can create some special moments. Same format and same timeline. The Kentucky Oaks and the Kentucky Derby, both in 2013, will be under this new eligibility system. As I said earlier, 36 races comprise the road to the Kentucky Derby. 35 races compose the road to the Kentucky Oaks. The Kentucky Oaks, you know, in my role as president of Churchill Downs, there were two things that immediately I looked at and said we need to start focusing on. One was to make sure the Kentucky Oaks was $1 million race, and we've accomplished that. It is $1 million race because it is the pinnacle for fillies in the United States, and it needs to have that focus. And we have really emphasized that day and what it means to racing. It is one of the most successful days and will continue to grow with the Survivors Parade, the viewership of the women who just love everything that we've done around the ladies' first day. So we're excited about that as well as the Kentucky Derby. The question is, does it make it more difficult for a filly to get into the Derby? And again, another great question. If you're a filly and you want to run in the Derby, then you have to run in the 36 races that are on the road to the Kentucky Derby, which are all open. So we will not have a situation where a filly can only run against fillies and be eligible for the Kentucky Derby. So if you look at the history, the winners of the fillies that have actually won the Kentucky Derby, they all ran against the boys before they won the Derby, and they all performed well. So that's an important thing to take. Now the flip side of that is, if a filly does decide to take a shot at the Derby and they think they have what it takes to get in the Derby and they run in the 36 races on that path, we're not going to penalize the filly. If they earn points in that race, those will be available on the road to the Kentucky Oaks. Jenny, the question was, have I heard from any racetracks this morning? I have been in here all morning and working, so I haven't heard from anybody. I've been following a little bit on the Twitter and on Facebook, and somebody's yelling at me for saying the Twitter. I can already hear it. I was going to say the Twitter feeds. But so I haven't heard anything from any racetracks. One of the things that, this was a very involved process, and I can tell you that what you have before you today isn't something that happened overnight. And I go back to our great team, Darren Rogers, Casey Ramage, John Asher, Ben Huffman. Our whole team has worked the last 11 months, not just to create this road to the Kentucky Derby, but to do it in a way that we think can energize people around the country around racing. Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create new fans. As Bob Evans said earlier, the Kentucky Derby is in great shape. We set a record attendance this year. We had fantastic viewership, record handle. How can we use the Derby to create that sort of energy around racing around the country? And that's what it's about. So we will be talking to racetracks. As I said, one of the things we've done is we've left it open for innovation, for new ideas. We've identified 36 races. If somebody has a great idea and they think something else needs to be in there, we will listen. We want to make sure that as we go forward, that not just the Derby, but the path to the Derby, the road to the Kentucky Derby, is relevant as well. So the question is, is it too late to add races or change the schedule for 2013? I think that's the core, and the answer is no. The reality is that stakes races around the country, all races around the country, are decided by the racetrack that are running them. So we have set this schedule based upon the historical path to the Derby and historical racing. But if a track, for example, decides they're not going to run a particular race, obviously that race will come off and we will look for other events to come in. Now, with that said, we are very mindful of the fact that the trainers and the owners have to make decisions on the path that they will take to qualify for the Derby. So we're going to, if we make any changes, it will be with plenty of opportunity for them to make decisions, and right now we think that's about a 60-day window. If we're done with everything else. So we'll make sure we finish this first, and then I'll be happy to take a question or two on that. The question is, are you taking away the fillies and the long shots? And the answer is no. It's just a different path. You're going to have long shots. I don't care what system you devise. We've gone through so many iterations of point systems, and what you find, let's say the top 15 qualifiers, they're pretty much going to qualify. We've done so many different versions that that's pretty much the way it is. Now, with that said, the number 1 qualifier under the graded stakes system of the past may be number 14 under this system if you're just looking to the past. Where the change is you have another 15 to 20 horses that are all vying for those last 5 spots. That doesn't change. So you're still going to have those horses and those trainers and those owners who are strategizing, and that'll be a lot of the fun. They're strategizing, how do I get in there because I think I've got the long shot on that day. Make no mistake about it, you'll still have the mystery, the pageantry, and all of that that makes the Kentucky Derby something special. Well, I think owners are always making the decision of what it is they're chasing. You have, the reality is they're all trying to make sure they at least break even, which is a tough thing to do in this business for the owners. I can't say enough about the people who invest their money in our sport because they love it. So we're excited about that. But they're always going to have to make that decision of, where do I go? The reality is, folks who have a promising, fast, strong 3-year-old are aiming for the Kentucky Derby. And that's the decision that they're always going to make is, how do I become the champion? Because that's what it's about. How do I ensure that my horse, my team, is recognized as the best, whether it's for the Kentucky Oaks and Fillies or for the Kentucky Derby. Okay, I think we're good on that. I'll take 1 or 2 questions before the question is. The question for those in the back was, how does the proposed rule change from the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission change racing here at Churchill Downs? And if you will, I'd just give a little bit of background. First of all, it's a proposed change by the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission of their regulations, which would not allow LASIKs in stakes races for 2-year-olds in 2014, for 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds in 2015, and for all horses in 2016. Did I say that right? 14, 15, 16. It's a 3-year cycle. So it doesn't go into effect immediately. It also does not go into effect until and unless the Kentucky legislature approves it through the administrative regulatory process. So with that said, Kentucky is at a competitive disadvantage when it comes to everyday racing on our circuit. And I'm not just talking about Churchill Downs. I'm talking about Ellis Park. I'm talking about Turfway, all of our racetracks around the state. And it's something we've been talking about for years. All of our competitors have enhanced their purses with money from casinos in one form or another. And so we are constantly in competition to recruit horses to Kentucky. And that's what it's all about. How big of a field can we get? Can we get a 10-horse field on a Thursday afternoon to make sure that it's exciting for the fans who are here and for those who are wagering out in the simulcast world and online? So that's the competition we have, and we have some barriers because of the fact that other tracks are enhancing their purses with casino money. The second thing that's weighing on us is that the foal crop is reduced over the last few years. A dramatic reduction of the number of foals, 25 to 30% over the last 3 or 4 years. So the competition is tougher for those horses, and there are fewer of them to compete for. So our position on this is, as it is with many issues, is make sure that we're not creating something that puts Kentucky at a competitive disadvantage, something that will give people a reason not to come to Kentucky to race. So we have made sure that the commissioners, that our legislators know that for us, it's about ensuring that the rules we put in place are, number one, best for the horse. Let's let the science decide this issue and not PR issues. And number two, that it's best for Kentucky racing. And that's pretty much sums it up. I think that if we have LASIX eliminated in Kentucky and we're on an island, then we will put Kentucky at a competitive disadvantage. The question was, do we think that if this does come to fruition, we will lose some top horses for the Kentucky Derby? It would impact the Kentucky Derby in 2015. I don't know the answer to that, Jenny. I don't. What I don't want is the road to the Kentucky Derby is all about giving people an understandable, reliable, stable path to the Derby. And we want our horsemen to have that regardless of what occurs. We want them to understand what the rules are so that their horse can be at top form. So creating a state that operates under different rules from everyone else doesn't seem to engender that sort of stability that we think is important for the people who have invested so strongly in our sport. So, any other issues that we want to hit? Well, again, I thank all of you all for coming here. We're very excited to host this today. I'll be around for a little bit. We've got some brochures. I should say that if you haven't gotten a copy of USA Today or today's Courier Journal, fantastic articles on the future of racing. Thank you.
Thanks again, guys. If any of you need a press release, we have a few of them up here on the table. I want to thank you for being here, and we've got some folks around for one-on-ones if you need them. It has been a very lively process in putting this together, and the statistical data provided by Darren Rogers, who is the Bill James of thoroughbred racing, has been breathtaking. So again, thanks for being here, and any questions we can help with, please let us know. Thanks to those of you watching online on the live stream of this, and it will be archived on our website if you missed part of it, and you can catch it later on. Thanks again so much, and we resume the countdown, continue the countdown to Kentucky Derby 139.